Now this is a very strange little plant that some people don't like. They think it's kind of weedy. And it does climb and crawl over all other sorts of plants. But it's not really a vine. So why don't you reach down and pick a little bit of this plant that's called bedstraw. If you pick it up, you'll see it feels really funny and it sort of sticks to itself. If you look really, really close, you'll see that there are little hooks all over this plant, and it allows it to kind of hold on to other plants. And so maybe it helps the plant climb over other plants, but we're going to see there might be another possible reason for those little hooks too. So the name from this plant, bedstraw, comes from the fact that indeed people used to put it into mattresses and sleep on it. And so some things that I read suggested that maybe that was because it had chemicals that would repel insects, and so it would keep the bed from, getting full of things like bed bugs and fleas and other kinds of parasites that people used to be plagued with. However, there could be another answer to that. So I read a recent paper where some scientists were studying these little hooks that are on the plant. So if you take a look at the picture here on the right, it's just showing in really, really close those little hooks that you can feel when you touch the leaves. And they're actually really curved. They're kind of like think of like a candy cane that curves way around. And so on the left on this picture, what you can see there is a bed bug. And so these scientists found that the hooks would actually trap insects that tried to crawl over the leaves. So the hooks would catch on their legs and other body parts. And so the bed bugs would essentially be killed by this plant. They wouldn't be able to crawl over it. So from the plant's point of view, maybe that what those hooks are for is about protecting the plant from insects that would try to eat it. And so the insects would get stuck and not be able to crawl around and eat things. And maybe the reason that people used this plant in their mattresses was because it would reduce the number of bed bugs. Bed bugs actually get on people. And so instead of being able to do that, the bed bugs would be trapped by this plant. So what the scientists were trying to do with this is actually use this to learn how to make clothing, how to make fabric, like sheets, for example, that could trap the bed bugs so they wouldn't cause problems for people. So they actually are trying to make fabric that has little hooks that are just like the hooks on plants like bedstraw. The other name for this plant, the formal name, it's called Gallium aperine. Plants all have common names that are used in everyday language, but they also have names that they were given, sometimes hundreds of years ago, that are in Latin. Those Latin names sometimes tell us a lot of really interesting history about the plants. So gallium is from a very old word, and it actually means milk. Historians think that maybe this plant, bedstraw, used to be used to help to make cheese. Okay, so to make cheese from milk, you have to coagulate some of the proteins in the milk and get them to all stick together to get firm. There are proteins in some species of the bedstraw that can be used to coagulate milk to make cheese. Now, most of the time, people use animal products to do that. They use a protein called rennet that comes from the stomachs of animals. But apparently, at least in some places, some people sometimes use this plant to do that rather than the animal parts. Another use for this plant is that it has sometimes been used as a sieve or a strainer. So you can imagine if you take a big ball of this plant and make it into kind of like a funnel shape, that maybe if you poured something through it, if there was debris in whatever you were pouring, that it would get caught on the leaves and it could clean up a solution that had like little bits of dirt in it or something like that. So maybe what happened was people were straining something out of their milk, and that's when they figured out that the proteins in the gallium would cause the milk to coagulate and become like cheese. I don't know. It's a pretty big speculation. But what you could do if you want to do a little thing to try and test this theory is take some dirty water, for example, or something that has bits of dirt in it, and see if you can make a sieve out of the gallium. So pull up a bunch of gallium, make it into a ball, and see if you pour dirty water through, does it catch all the little bits of stuff and clean up the water. Now, if you do that, be careful. The little hooks sometimes irritate the skin a little bit, but just don't rub it on yourself, and I think you'll be fine. So even though this plant might be considered kind of weedy, it has a pretty interesting history, and it's kind of fun to see it out here on the Kenwood Heritage Trail. Enjoy your walk.